UK housing market going to a point that is irreversible. It's not only about house prices, not about rent, not about taxes. Wherever we look at the market, it seems worse than other parts. And in my 20 years of real estate life, I have never seen such a thing. Rent prices have doubled in the last 2 decades. House prices, in some areas, they have even quadrupled. And it even gets worse with the government actions because they seem to do nothing about it. Every year, the gap between housing demand and supply grows wider by around 120,000 homes. Yes, 120,000. Over 10 years, that means more than 1 million missing homes. But let's say you're lucky and actually find a house. It turns out the average deposit in the UK is between £50,000 and £100,000. Well, if we can't buy, then we can rent. Not so easy. In the UK, the average person spends 36% of their salary on rent. And in London, it's 41%. That means more than a third of what they earn goes just to rent. And once you add bills and taxes, it can easily reach half of their income. You see, I'm not exaggerating at all. The UK is coming to an end point, and it's not somewhere we like to see. But the question is, why has all this indeed happened? Let's go back to a time when housing, which is a fundamental human right, was accessible in the UK. In the early 2000s, a person renting only spent 15 to 20% of their salary, and buying a house was way more accessible. But you see the problem. There were not enough houses being constructed compared to population growth. And in 2 decades, this has caused the UK market to get destroyed. Since the 2000s, the housing gap has grown to 6,500,000. Yes, you heard that right. 6,500,000. That means tens of millions are being affected by it. And the government is still not reaching the construction goals needed to make the market stable. But what about private companies? I mean, they also build houses, right? According to recent official insolvency statistics, the construction industry has had one of the highest failure rates of any sector in the UK. In the last 12 months, over 4,000 construction companies in the UK have collapsed, and 7,361 companies are at high financial risk, meaning they are also on the verge of collapsing. Private construction companies make up 70 to 80% of the entire sector, which means that without them, there is no way the UK government can meet housing demand, especially with a supply gap of millions of homes built up over decades. And this is exactly where the situation starts to feel unstable. Because if most of the housing supply depends on private construction companies, and those same companies are collapsing one by one, then who is actually going to build the homes the country desperately needs? Think about it. Costs are rising. Materials are more expensive than they were a few years ago. Labor shortages haven't really recovered. Interest rates have gone up, so borrowing money to start new projects is much more expensive. So even if a developer wants to build, the numbers don't make sense anymore. Projects get delayed. Some never even start. But at the same time, demand hasn't disappeared. People are still forming households. Young adults still want to move out. Families still grow. Migration still adds pressure. But supply cannot respond. And when supply cannot respond in a market like housing, prices don't just cool down, they harden. Now add mortgage rates to the equation. For years, cheap money pushed property prices higher and higher. Buyers could borrow more, so sellers asked for more. But once rates increased, affordability dropped almost overnight. Monthly payments jumped dramatically. Suddenly, even people with stable incomes couldn't pass affordability checks. The consequences of this imbalance are now visible everywhere. Young people who once expected to move out and start their own lives in their mid-20s are now trapped at home well into their 30s. Even those with stable jobs often cannot save enough for a deposit because rent and bills consume so much of their income. With the average deposit for a first-time buyer hovering around £70,000, the dream of home ownership has shifted from an achievable milestone to a distant goal for millions. Private construction firms are struggling to fill the gap. With over 4,000 companies having collapsed in the past year and thousands more at high risk, the sector is too unstable to reliably increase housing supply. Rising material costs, labor shortages, and higher interest rates make new projects riskier. So, even when developers plan to build, delays are inevitable. This uncertainty means that the already massive gap of over 6 million homes is unlikely to shrink anytime soon. Meanwhile, demand continues to grow. Household formation, natural population growth, and immigration all put pressure on a system that simply cannot respond. The result is a market that hardens, not cools. Prices don't adjust gradually, they spike. Renters feel it first, but buyers are also affected as mortgage approvals tighten and monthly payments rise dramatically. Affordability has become the defining issue, and it shows no signs of improving. Investors and overseas buyers further distort the situation. A significant portion of new builds, especially in cities, is purchased as an investment rather than a home. Many units remain empty, reducing the effective supply for people who need housing. Meanwhile, local residents are priced out, creating pockets of communities where homeownership is increasingly unattainable. The market is no longer just about numbers. It is about who can realistically access a home at all. Without decisive action, the UK housing market seems poised to reach a point of no return. Supply will continue to lag behind demand, prices and rents will remain elevated, and young generations will face barriers that were once unimaginable. Unless construction capacity is expanded, regulations are adjusted, and investment patterns reconsidered, the cycle of instability will continue. And what was once a system that enabled people to build lives around their homes may become permanently inaccessible to the majority. The UK housing market is under enormous pressure. Over 6 million households lack adequate housing, while only around 180,000 to 190,000 new homes are built each year, far below the 300,000 target. Private construction firms are struggling, with over 4,000 collapsing last year alone. Costs for materials and labor have surged, interest rates are high, and planning rules delay projects. At the same time, demand keeps growing. Young adults want independence, families are expanding, and migration adds pressure. First-time buyers now need deposits averaging £70,000, and renters spend 36% of their income on rent, rising to 41% in London. Investors, especially overseas, further reduce supply by buying properties as assets rather than homes. The result: a market that increasingly excludes ordinary people. Overall, prices and rents are likely to keep rising, supply will remain tight, and younger generations will face the worst consequences. Without major changes, more construction, regulatory reform, and limits on speculative investment, the UK housing market could reach a tipping point that is hard to reverse. This isn't just a financial problem, it affects families, communities, and the future of millions.